The day my wife asked me to be her best friend was the same day I found out she'd been screwing her yoga instructor for 6 months. Not exactly the kind of coincidence that restores your faith in the universe. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Mike, I really think we can make this work, Laura said, sitting across from me at our kitchen table with that earnest expression she usually reserved for discussing organic produce. I mean, why should divorce ruin a perfectly good friendship? I stared at her over my coffee mug, wondering if she'd practiced this speech in the mirror. Probably. Laura practiced everything, from her Instagram captions to her fake laugh at dinner parties. The woman had turned authenticity into performance art. A friendship, I repeated slowly. You want to be friends. Exactly. She clapped her hands together like she'd just solved world hunger. We can still do brunch, still text about funny things we see. Nothing has to change except the legal stuff. Nothing has to change. Right. Except for the part where she'd been lying to me for half a year while I worked 60-hour weeks to pay for her freelance writing career that consisted mainly of unpaid blog posts about sustainable living and artisanal coffee. And Simon? I asked, watching her face carefully. Where does your yoga instructor fit into this friendship plan? The slight tightening around her eyes told me everything I needed to know. She hadn't expected me to know his name. Simon is... He's helping me through this difficult transition, she said, her voice taking on that practiced therapeutic tone she'd picked up from her self-help podcasts. This isn't about him, Mike. This is about us choosing to be mature adults. Mature adults. I almost laughed. There was nothing mature about a 36-year-old woman who still put unicorn stickers on her laptop and expected her husband to pay her phone bill after she'd been cheating on him. So let me get this straight, I said, setting down my mug. You want to divorce me, keep sleeping with Simon, but still have me in your life for emotional support and probably financial backup when your writing career doesn't pan out. Laura's mouth opened and closed like a fish. That's not... You're making it sound so calculated. Aren't I supposed to be your friend now? Friends are honest with each other. She stood up abruptly, smoothing down her yoga pants. I can see you're not ready to have this conversation maturely. Maybe we should talk when you're less angry. Less angry. As if anger was some temporary inconvenience, like a headache that would pass if I just took the right pills and got enough sleep. After she left for her meditation class, which I now knew was code for screwing Simon in his overpriced downtown loft, I sat alone in our kitchen, looking around at the life we'd built together, the coffee maker we'd bought for our 3rd anniversary, the little herb garden she'd insisted on starting last spring, the refrigerator covered in takeout menus from restaurants we'd never go to together again. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily, Laura's best friend since college. Heard about the divorce. You okay? Emily Chen was the one person in Laura's social circle who'd never made me feel like an accessory to my wife's lifestyle brand. She was sharp, funny, and had a way of cutting through bullshit that Laura found threatening, which probably explained why their friendship had been strained lately. Define okay, I texted back. Want to grab a beer? I promise not to give you any advice about healing or finding yourself. I found myself smiling for the first time in weeks. Deal. Murphy's at 7? See you there. At Murphy's pub, Emily was already waiting in our usual booth, nursing a whiskey sour. She looked up as I approached, and I saw something in her expression I couldn't quite read. You look like hell, she said by way of greeting. Thank you. That's exactly what my ego needed to hear. She gestured to the bartender. 2 more, and keep them coming. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the evening crowd filter in. Construction workers grabbing a quick one after their shift. Office workers like me, looking to wash away another day of corporate monotony. A few couples on dates, still in that stage where they actually listen to each other. So, Emily said finally, How much do you know? About Simon? Enough. About the rest of it? I looked at her sharply. What rest of it? Emily sighed and pulled out her phone. Laura's been busy and not very discreet about it. She showed me a series of Instagram stories. Laura at expensive restaurants I couldn't afford. Laura at a spa weekend I definitely hadn't paid for. Laura wearing jewelry I'd never seen before, including a diamond bracelet that cost more than my monthly salary. Simon's married, Emily said quietly. His wife Anna is actually really nice. They have 2 kids. The whiskey turned to acid in my stomach. Laura knows this? She knows. She thinks Anna doesn't appreciate Simon's artistic soul. Emily made air quotes, her voice dripping with disgust. Apparently, Anna is too focused on practical things like mortgage payments and their kids' college funds. I stared at the photos, feeling something cold and calculating settle in my chest. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. This was about Laura systematically dismantling not just our marriage, but someone else's family, all while positioning herself as the victim of an amicable divorce. There's more, Emily said. She's been telling people that you're the one who wanted the divorce, that you've been emotionally distant and unsupportive of her career. My career that I've been financially supporting for 3 years? The very same. Emily finished her drink. She's also been asking mutual friends to choose sides. Most of them are choosing hers. That explained why my phone had been so quiet lately. Why Tom from our couple's game night group had been avoiding my calls. Why Jennifer, who used to text me funny memes, had suddenly gone silent. I'm sorry, Mike, Emily said. I know this is a lot. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Laura's your best friend. Emily was quiet for a long moment, staring into her empty glass. Was my best friend. Past tense. You know what she said when I tried to talk her out of this? She said I wouldn't understand because I've never been brave enough to go after what I really want. And what does she really want? Simon's money, apparently, and the lifestyle that comes with it. Emily looked up at me. She's planning to move in with him as soon as his divorce is finalized. She's already picked out furniture. I felt that cold calculation spreading through my chest, sharpening into something that felt almost like clarity. Laura wanted to play games? She wanted to rewrite history and manipulate our friends into taking sides? She wanted to destroy someone else's marriage while painting herself as the mature one? Fine. But she'd forgotten one crucial detail. I was really, really good at games when I decided to play them. Emily, I said slowly, how would you feel about helping me level the playing field? She looked at me for a long moment, and then a slow smile spread across her face. What did you have in mind? 3 weeks later, I was standing in the bathroom of the Westwood Country Club, adjusting my tie and wondering if I'd lost my mind. The invitation had been Laura's masterstroke of passive-aggressive manipulation, a celebration of new beginnings. Essentially a divorce party, disguised as a sophisticated social gathering. To show everyone that we're handling this like adults, she'd explained over the phone. Plus, Simon's been wanting to meet our friends properly. Our friends. As if she hadn't spent the last month systematically poisoning them against me. I checked my phone. Emily had texted 15 minutes ago. Package delivered. You sure about this? The package in question was currently hidden in my jacket pocket. A small device that Deshawn, the tech-savvy legal assistant at my lawyer's office, had helped me acquire. Perfectly legal, he'd assured me. Just a little Bluetooth transmitter that could hijack nearby display screens. As sure as I can be about anything anymore, I texted back. The main ballroom was exactly what I'd expected. Tastefully decorated in Laura's favorite colors, filled with people I'd known for years, who now looked at me like I was a stranger. The guest list was a careful curation of our social circle, weighted heavily toward people who'd already chosen Laura's side. Tom and Jennifer were there, standing near the bar and studiously avoiding eye contact with me. Mark and Susan from our old neighborhood, whispering to each other and glancing in my direction. Even my own coworker Trent had shown up, though he gave me a supportive nod from across the room. And then there was Simon. I'd seen pictures, but meeting him in person was something else entirely. He was exactly the kind of man Laura had always claimed she wasn't attracted to: tall, expensively dressed, with the kind of confident smile that came from never having to worry about money. He had his hand on the small of Laura's back in a gesture that was supposed to look casual but screamed ownership. "Mike!" Laura spotted me and practically floated over, her face glowing with the kind of happiness I hadn't seen from her in years. "I'm so glad you came. This means so much to me." She was wearing a new dress, red silk, probably cost more than my car payment, and jewelry I'd definitely never seen before. The transformation was remarkable. In just a few weeks, she'd gone from my struggling freelance writer wife to someone who looked like she belonged in the society pages. "Wouldn't miss it," I said, accepting her hug and breathing in her perfume. Also new, also expensive. "Come on, you have to meet Simon properly." She dragged me over to where Simon was holding court with a small group of admirers. Up close, I could see the calculation behind his warm smile. This was a man who was used to getting what he wanted. "Simon, this is Mike," Laura said, her voice bright with artificial cheer. "My ex-husband." Ex-husband. We weren't even officially divorced yet, but apparently I'd already been relegated to past tense. "Mike!" Simon extended his hand with practiced enthusiasm. "I've heard so much about you. Laura speaks of you so fondly." I shook his hand, noting the firm grip and the expensive watch. "All good things, I hope." "Of course. She's told me how supportive you've been during this transition. It takes a special kind of man to put his ex-wife's happiness first." The condescension was subtle, but unmistakable. He was marking his territory, making it clear that he was the generous winner, and I was the gracious loser who knew when to step aside. "Laura's happiness has always been my priority," I said, matching his smile. "Sometimes that means knowing when to let go, and sometimes it means knowing when to hold on tight." Something flickered behind Simon's eyes. Laura, oblivious to the subtext, squeezed my arm. "See? I told you he was amazing. We're going to be such good friends." The evening progressed with painful predictability. Laura gave a speech about new chapters and growing in different directions. Simon talked about supporting each other's journeys and the beauty of conscious uncoupling. Several of our former mutual friends nodded along, apparently buying into this sanitized version of our marriage's end. I nursed my whiskey and waited. The opportunity came during the dessert course. Laura had insisted on a slideshow, a celebration of all the good times we shared, and the country club's AV team had set up a large screen at the front of the room. As Laura stood up to introduce the presentation, I quietly activated Deshawn's little device. "Before we look at these wonderful memories," Laura was saying, "I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Your support means everything to me during this difficult but exciting time." She clicked the remote to start the slideshow, but instead of our wedding photos, the screen filled with something else entirely, a series of text messages between Laura and Simon, dating back 8 months. The room went silent as people read the messages. Laura's promises to leave me as soon as the timing was right. Simon's complaints about his boring wife who didn't understand him, detailed discussions about their weekend getaways and expensive gifts, and most damaging of all, their cruel jokes about my obliviousness and their friends' reactions to the affair. "What the hell is this?" Laura's voice cracked across the silent room. I stood up slowly, pulling out my phone and pretending to check it with surprise. "Oh, that's weird. I think someone's Bluetooth got mixed up with the AV system. Technology, right?" But the damage was done. The carefully constructed narrative of our mature, mutual divorce was crumbling in real time. People were staring at Laura and Simon with a mixture of shock and disgust. Someone in the back of the room whispered, 8 months, while they were still married? Simon was frantically trying to get the attention of the AV technician, but the messages kept cycling through. Each one made the situation worse. Laura's complaints about having to pretend to be happy with me. Simon's promises about the life they'd have together once he dealt with his wife. Their mutual agreement that I was too naive to figure it out. This is private, Laura stammered, her face now matching her red dress. Someone hacked my phone. This is illegal. Emily, who had been sitting quietly at a table near the back, stood up. Actually, Laura, I think people deserve to know the truth. Especially Anna. Anna, Simon's wife, who I now noticed was sitting at a table near the front, staring at the screen with the expression of someone watching her life implode in high definition. Anna, I can explain, Simon started, but Anna was already gathering her purse and walking toward the exit with the dignity of someone who'd been expecting this moment for a long time. The room erupted in whispers and awkward shuffling. Several people followed Anna out, including Tom and Jennifer, who finally made eye contact with me, apologetic and embarrassed. Laura was still standing at the front of the room, the remote hanging uselessly in her hand. The slideshow had finally reverted to our actual wedding photos, creating a surreal contrast between the happy couple on screen and the devastation in the room. I think, I said, standing up and straightening my jacket, this is my cue to leave. Thank you all for coming tonight. It's been very illuminating. I walked toward the exit, pausing only to place a gentle hand on Laura's shoulder. You wanted everyone to see how mature we could be about this divorce, I said quietly, just loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. Mission accomplished. As I reached the door, I heard Simon's voice behind me. You son of a bitch! You planned this! I turned back with my most innocent expression. Planned what? A technical glitch? Simon, I sell marketing software for a living. I barely know how to work the TV remote at home. But my eyes told a different story, and Simon was smart enough to read them. This was just the beginning. The fallout from the divorce party was swift and brutal. By Monday morning, Laura's carefully curated social media presence had been flooded with comments from people who'd seen the screenshots that had inevitably made their way online. Her freelance writing clients, many of whom she'd met through our social circle, began quietly dropping her projects. I learned all this from Emily, who had become my unofficial intelligence source in what was rapidly becoming a Cold War. She's panicking, Emily reported over coffee at our new regular spot, a diner far from Laura's usual haunts. She called me at midnight last night, crying about how you've destroyed her reputation and ruined her life. Her reputation destroyed itself, I said, stirring sugar into my coffee. I just provided the venue. Simon's not taking it well either. Anna filed for divorce on Monday. She's asking for full custody and half of everything, including his precious real estate portfolio. I felt a grim satisfaction at that news. Simon's wealth had been the primary attraction for Laura, and watching it disappear in legal fees and alimony payments seemed like poetic justice. There's something else, Emily said, lowering her voice. Laura's been asking around about you, specifically about your finances and whether you might have any vulnerabilities she could exploit. What kind of vulnerabilities? The kind that might give her leverage in the divorce proceedings. She's also been talking to Harper about whether you might have been having an affair. Harper, Laura's work friend who'd always struck me as the type of person who collected other people's secrets like trading cards. If Laura was bringing Harper into this, she was definitely escalating. An affair? With who? Emily's cheeks flushed slightly. Me, actually. She thinks we've been suspiciously close lately. The irony wasn't lost on me. Laura, who'd been cheating for 8 months, was now trying to paint me as the unfaithful spouse because I'd been spending time with the one person who'd shown me genuine friendship during this mess. Are we? I asked quietly. Suspiciously close? Emily looked down at her coffee. I don't know. Are we? The question hung in the air between us. Over the past few weeks, Emily had become more than just an ally in my war against Laura's manipulation. She'd become the person I looked forward to seeing, the one who made me laugh when everything else felt like it was falling apart. But pursuing anything with her now would be complicated in ways I wasn't sure I was ready to handle. "Let's table that conversation," I said finally. "At least until this divorce is finalized." Emily nodded, but I caught the flash of disappointment in her eyes. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Simon." I showed Emily the message. She frowned. "That doesn't sound good." "Probably not, but I'm curious to hear what he has to say." We agreed to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop in the business district, public enough to prevent any dramatic confrontations. Simon was already there when I arrived, looking significantly less polished than he had at the country club. His expensive suit couldn't hide the stress lines around his eyes, or the fact that he'd probably been drinking. "You destroyed my marriage," he said without preamble as I sat down across from him. "I'm pretty sure you did that yourself," I replied calmly. "I just provided the documentation." Simon leaned forward, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Do you have any idea what you've cost me? Anna's lawyers are going to take me apart. My business partners are asking questions. My kids won't even talk to me. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to screw my wife." "Your wife came on to me," Simon snapped. "She was the one who pursued this relationship. She was the one who said you were emotionally unavailable and that your marriage was already over." I studied his face, looking for signs of deception. There was desperation there, and anger, but also something that might have been truth. It was entirely possible that Laura had been the aggressor in their relationship. She'd always been good at getting what she wanted. "Even if that's true," I said, "you made the choice to go along with it. You made the choice to help her lie to me for 8 months. And you made the choice to humiliate me at that party by playing the magnanimous winner." Simon sat back in his chair, some of the fight going out of him. "What do you want?" "I want you to stay away from Laura." "What?" "You heard me. End it. Tell her it's over. Tell her you've decided to try to save your marriage, or that the guilt is eating you alive, or that you've found someone else. I don't care what story you use." Simon stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "Why would I do that?" "Because if you don't, I'll make sure Anna's lawyers get copies of every text message, every email, every receipt from your little romantic getaways. I'll make sure they know about the jewelry, the spa weekends, the expensive dinners, and I'll make sure they can prove you were using marital assets to fund your affair. You're bluffing. You don't have access to that information." I pulled out my phone and showed him a screenshot of his credit card statement from the previous month. Deshawn had been very thorough in his research. Simon's face went white. "How did you—" "Does it matter? The point is, I have it. All of it. And Anna's lawyers would love to get their hands on this kind of evidence. This is blackmail. This is consequences," I corrected. "You wanted to play games with people's lives. Now you get to experience what it feels like to be a game piece." Simon was quiet for a long moment, staring at the credit card statement on my phone. Finally, he looked up at me with something that might have been respect. "You're not the pathetic cuckold Laura made you out to be, are you?" "Apparently not." "Fine. I'll end it with Laura, but this doesn't make us even." "I wasn't looking to be even," I said, standing up. "I was looking to win." As I walked away, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and unease. I'd neutralized Simon, but I'd also crossed a line I wasn't sure I could uncross. The man I'd been 6 months ago would never have blackmailed someone, would never have hacked into private financial records, would never have orchestrated such a calculated act of revenge. But that man had also been naive enough to let his wife cheat on him for 8 months while he worked overtime to pay for her lifestyle. Maybe becoming someone harder, someone more ruthless, wasn't entirely a bad thing. My phone rang as I was getting into my car. Laura's name flashed on the screen. "You bastard," she said without preamble when I answered. "Simon just broke up with me. What did you do?" "I had a conversation with him about consequences," I said calmly. "Apparently he decided he wasn't ready for them." "This is insane, Mike. You're destroying people's lives over a failed marriage." "I'm responding to people who destroyed my life over a failed marriage. There's a difference." "I never meant for things to happen this way." Laura's voice cracked. "I never wanted to hurt you." For a moment, she sounded like the woman I'd married. Vulnerable and uncertain. The way she used to sound when she was worried about a job interview or a difficult conversation with her parents. But I'd learned not to trust Laura's vulnerability. She'd weaponized it too many times. "Maybe not," I said. "But you did hurt me. And you did it while asking me to be your friend and pay your bills and celebrate your new relationship. So forgive me if I'm not particularly concerned about your feelings right now." "What do you want from me, Mike? What will it take for you to stop this?" I thought about it for a moment. What did I want? An apology? A public acknowledgement of what she'd done? Her friends to know the truth about our marriage? Actually, I realized, I wanted something much simpler than that. "I want you to leave me alone," I said finally. "I want you to stop trying to manipulate our friends into choosing sides. I want you to stop spreading lies about why our marriage ended, and I want you to finalize this divorce so we can both move on with our lives. And if I do that, you'll stop whatever this is you're doing?" "Laura, I haven't even started whatever this is I'm doing. But if you can manage to act like an actual adult for the next few months, maybe I won't need to." I hung up before she could respond, but I had a feeling this conversation was far from over. Laura's idea of acting like an adult, it turned out, was to launch a full-scale social media campaign painting me as an abusive, controlling husband who was stalking and harassing her during our amicable divorce. I discovered this 3 days later when Trent forwarded me a screenshot of Laura's Facebook post, which had already been shared 47 times. "I never wanted to air private details about my marriage," the post began, "but I feel I need to speak out about the harassment I've been experiencing from my ex-husband. What started as an attempt at an amicable divorce has turned into a nightmare of stalking, intimidation, and emotional abuse. I'm sharing this not for sympathy, but to encourage other women who might be experiencing similar situations to seek help. No one should have to live in fear." The post was accompanied by a carefully curated selection of photos. Laura looking vulnerable and sad, a screenshot of a text I'd sent asking about picking up my tools from the garage, presented as evidence of constant unwanted contact, and a photo of her car with a small scratch on the bumper that she was apparently attributing to my escalating behavior. "This is insane," I told Emily over the phone. "I've barely spoken to her since the divorce party." "I know, but it's working. Harper's been sharing the post everywhere and people are eating it up. The comments are brutal." I scrolled through the comments myself, feeling sick. People I'd known for years were calling me a psycho and a stalker. Several suggested Laura should get a restraining order. One person helpfully provided the phone number for a domestic violence hotline. "She's good," I admitted grudgingly. "Evil, but good." "There's more," Emily said. "She's been calling around to your coworkers, asking concerned questions about your mental state and whether you've been acting strangely at work." "She what?" "Harper called my office yesterday, supposedly on Laura's behalf, asking if I'd noticed any troubling changes in your behavior. She wanted to know if you'd been drinking more, if you'd seemed angry or unstable, if I was concerned for my safety, spending time with you." The calculated nature of it was breathtaking. Laura wasn't just trying to win the divorce. She was trying to destroy my reputation, my career, and my relationships. She was trying to isolate me completely. "We need to fight back," I said. "How? If you respond publicly, it'll just look like you're proving her point about harassment." She was right. Laura had put me in a perfect double bind: defend myself, and I'd look like an aggressive ex-husband who couldn't let go, stay silent, and let her narrative become the accepted truth. But Laura had made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated how much documentation I'd been gathering over the past few weeks. "Emily," I said slowly, "how would you feel about having lunch with Harper?" "Harper? Why would I want to do that?" "Because Harper loves gossip more than she loves Laura. And I think it's time Harper learned some interesting facts about Laura's version of events." The lunch took place 2 days later at a trendy bistro downtown. Emily played her role perfectly, acting like a concerned friend who was struggling with divided loyalties. "I just don't know what to believe anymore," Emily told Harper over salads and white wine. "Laura says Mike is stalking her, but I've been spending time with him, and he seems more sad than scary." Harper, predictably, leaned in with gleaming eyes. "What kind of things has he been doing?" "That's just it," Emily said, pulling out her phone. "I keep asking Laura for specifics, and the stories keep changing, like this text she's been showing everyone as proof of harassment." Emily showed Harper the screenshot of my text about picking up my tools. "She told me this was from last week, but look at the timestamp. It's from 3 weeks ago, before any of this drama started." Harper frowned, studying the image. "Maybe she just got confused about the date." "Maybe. But then there's this." Emily showed Harper another screenshot. Laura's own text to me from the same day, asking me to come get my junk out of the garage because Simon was coming over and she didn't want him to see it. "She asked him to come get his stuff," Harper said slowly. "Right. And this scratch on her car that she's blaming on Mike? I was with her when it happened. She scraped it on a concrete pillar in the parking garage at the mall." Emily had done her homework. Over the course of the lunch, she systematically dismantled Laura's narrative with timestamps, contradictory statements, and photographic evidence. By the time they finished their wine, Harper looked like someone who'd just discovered that her favorite reality TV show was scripted. "Why are you telling me this?" Harper asked. "Because I care about Laura," Emily said, which was technically true, even if the nature of that care had shifted significantly. "And I think she's making a huge mistake. This isn't going to end well for anyone." Harper was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she asked the question Emily had been waiting for. "What do you think really happened?" Emily sighed dramatically. "I think Laura got caught up in something exciting with Simon, and when it blew up in her face, she decided Mike was a convenient scapegoat. But Mike's not the pushover she thought he was." "What do you mean?" "I mean, he's been documenting everything. Every text, every phone call, every social media post. His lawyer has it all." This was true. Deshawn had been very thorough in building what he called our defensive file. If Laura tried to pursue any legal action based on her harassment claims, we had enough evidence to not only disprove her allegations, but to potentially file counterclaims for defamation. Harper's eyes widened. "He's going to sue her?" "I don't know. But Harper, if this goes to court, everything's going to come out. The timeline of her affair, the financial stuff, all the lies she's been telling. It's going to be ugly." Emily let that sink in for a moment, then played her final card. "The thing is, I think Mike would be willing to just let this whole thing die quietly if Laura would stop trying to destroy his reputation. He doesn't want a war. But if she keeps pushing—" She shrugged, letting Harper's imagination fill in the blanks. The results were swift and dramatic. Within 24 hours, Harper had apparently shared her new information with several key people in Laura's social circle. By the weekend, the tide of public opinion had begun to shift. Comments on Laura's Facebook post started questioning her version of events. People began asking for more specific details about the alleged harassment. Laura, predictably, doubled down. She posted a follow-up message about victim blaming and how typical it was for people to question a woman's account of abuse. But the post felt desperate rather than convincing. The final blow came from an unexpected source. Anna, Simon's soon-to-be ex-wife. Anna had apparently been doing her own investigation into her husband's affair, and she'd uncovered some interesting information about Laura's role in pursuing the relationship. More importantly, she'd found evidence that Laura had been researching Simon's financial situation long before their affair began, including social media stalking and online searches about his business ventures. Anna shared this information with several mutual acquaintances, painting a picture of Laura as a calculating gold digger who had targeted Simon specifically for his wealth. Combined with Harper's revelations about the inconsistencies in Laura's harassment claims, it created a narrative that was far more damaging than anything I could have orchestrated myself. "Laura's having a complete meltdown," Emily reported during our coffee meeting on Sunday morning. "She called me at 2 a.m. last night, screaming about how everyone had turned against her and how this was all your fault." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that actions have consequences, and maybe she should have thought about that before she decided to destroy 2 marriages and then lie about it." I felt a moment of sympathy for Laura, despite everything. She'd been so confident in her ability to control the narrative, so sure that she could manipulate people into seeing her as the victim. The reality that her lies were catching up with her must have been devastating. But the sympathy was brief. Laura had made her choices, and now she was experiencing the results of those choices. If she was unhappy with the outcome, she should have made better decisions. "There's something else," Emily said, her voice suddenly serious. "Laura's been asking questions about us, about whether we're sleeping together." "Are we?" I asked, echoing our conversation from the week before. Emily looked at me steadily. "Do you want to be?" The question hung between us like a bridge I could either cross or burn. Dating Emily would complicate everything. It would give Laura ammunition for her claims about my motives. It would blur the lines between friendship and something more complex. But looking at Emily across the table, remembering all the ways she'd supported me through this mess, all the conversations and shared laughter and moments of genuine connection, I realized I'd already made my decision weeks ago. "Yes," I said simply. Emily smiled, and for the first time in months, I felt like something in my life was moving in the right direction. "Good," she said. "Because I've been wanting to kiss you for about 3 weeks now." "What's stopping you?" "The fact that we're in a public place, and I have some dignity." I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. "Your place or mine?" "Mine. But first, we need to talk about what this means for the war with Laura." "What war with Laura?" I asked innocently. I thought that was over. Emily gave me a look that suggested she knew me better than that. "Mike, Laura's not going to just slink away quietly. She's going to escalate, and when she finds out about us, she's going to discover that some wars aren't worth fighting." But even as I said it, I knew Emily was right. Laura wasn't finished with me yet, and I wasn't finished with her either. The real battle was just beginning. Laura's final gambit came in the form of a legal threat, a cease and desist letter delivered to my office on a Tuesday morning, demanding that I stop harassing, defaming, and stalking her, and threatening a lawsuit if I didn't comply. The letter was signed by Rachel Morrison, a lawyer with a reputation for taking on high-profile divorce cases and a particular specialty in representing women in contentious custody battles. Laura had clearly decided to escalate to nuclear warfare. "This is actually good news," Deshawn told me when I showed him the letter. "It means she's desperate, and it also means she's made a tactical error." "How so?" "Because everything in this letter is provably false. We have documentation showing that you haven't contacted her except in response to her contacting you first. We have evidence that she's the one who's been spreading false information, and we have witnesses who can testify to the actual timeline of events." Deshawn was right, but I also knew that legal battles were expensive and time-consuming, even when you were in the right. Laura was betting that I'd rather settle quietly than fight a prolonged court case. She was wrong. "Draft a response," I told Deshawn. "Make it clear that we welcome the opportunity to present the facts in court. and include copies of everything we've documented about her actual behavior. Are you sure? This could get ugly. Deshawn, it's already ugly. The question is whether we're going to let Laura control the narrative or whether we're going to tell the truth. The response letter, delivered the next day, was a masterpiece of legal precision. It methodically refuted every claim in Laura's cease and desist, provided documented evidence of her lies and manipulation, and concluded with an offer to resolve the matter through mediation, provided Laura was willing to publicly retract her false statements and agree to stop her own harassment campaign. Laura's reaction was swift and predictable. She escalated again. This time, she organized what she called a support group for women dealing with abusive ex-husbands. The group was scheduled to meet at the same country club where our divorce party had taken place, and Laura had invited local media to cover the event as a story about domestic violence awareness. It was a brilliant move, really. By framing her personal vendetta as a broader social issue, Laura was making it almost impossible for me to respond without looking like I was attacking victims of domestic abuse. Almost impossible. She's going to hold her press conference on Thursday at 2 p.m., Emily told me over dinner at her apartment. Harper's been helping her organize it. They've got about 20 women signed up to attend. 20 women who think I'm an abusive stalker based on Laura's lies. Not all of them. Anna's going to be there. I looked up from my pasta. Simon's ex-wife? Why? Emily smiled. Because Anna has some things to say about Laura's version of events. And because Anna has a very good lawyer who thinks Laura's public statements about the affair might constitute defamation of her client. The pieces were starting to come together. Anna wasn't just attending Laura's support group as a participant. She was attending as an adversary. There's something else, Emily said. I think you should be there too. At Laura's anti-abusive husband support group? That seems like a terrible idea. Not as a participant, as a spectator. The event is open to the public. Laura made sure of that for the media coverage, and I think it's time people heard your side of the story. The idea was terrifying and appealing in equal measure. For months, I'd been fighting Laura's lies through proxy battles and behind-the-scenes maneuvering. The thought of confronting her directly, in front of witnesses and cameras, felt like stepping into a boxing ring after months of shadowboxing. What if it backfires? What if I just look like the angry ex-husband proving her point? Then you'll look like an angry ex-husband who's telling the truth, Emily said. Mike, you've been playing defense this entire time. Maybe it's time to go on offense. Thursday arrived gray and drizzling, which seemed appropriate for what was about to unfold. I arrived at the country club 30 minutes before the event was scheduled to begin, wearing my best suit and carrying a folder full of documents that Deshawn had prepared. The main ballroom had been reconfigured since our divorce party. Instead of round tables and a dance floor, there were rows of chairs facing a small stage where Laura would presumably hold court. Local news crews were setting up cameras, and a reporter from the city's main newspaper was interviewing early arrivals. I took a seat in the back row, trying to look inconspicuous. Several women were already seated, most of whom I didn't recognize. But I spotted Harper near the front, and Anna sitting by herself in the middle section, looking like someone preparing for battle. Laura entered exactly at 2 p.m., accompanied by her lawyer Rachel Morrison and a woman I didn't recognize who was apparently a counselor specializing in domestic violence cases. Laura was dressed in a conservative black suit that made her look professional and vulnerable at the same time. She'd clearly thought carefully about the optics. "Thank you all for coming," Laura began, her voice carrying clearly through the room's sound system. "I know it takes courage to be here, to share your stories and support each other through these difficult experiences." She launched into a prepared speech about the prevalence of emotional abuse in marriages, the way controlling partners used financial and social manipulation to maintain power, and the challenges women faced when trying to leave abusive relationships. It was articulate, passionate, and completely divorced from the reality of our marriage. "My own experience," Laura continued, "has shown me how sophisticated these patterns of abuse can be. how a man can present himself as the victim while systematically destroying his wife's reputation, her friendships, her career, and her sense of self-worth. Several women in the audience nodded sympathetically. The news cameras captured every moment. Even now, months after I left my abusive marriage, the harassment continues. The stalking, the intimidation, the attempts to turn my friends against me. But I refuse to be silenced. I refuse to let fear control my life. It was a masterful performance, and I felt a grudging admiration for Laura's skill, even as I was disgusted by her dishonesty. She'd managed to take every action I'd taken in response to her betrayal and reframe it as evidence of my abuse. But then Anna stood up. "Excuse me," Anna said, her voice cutting through Laura's speech. "I have a question." Laura looked startled. This wasn't part of her planned program. "Of course. Please, share your story." "My story," Anna said, walking toward the front of the room, "is about a woman who deliberately targeted my husband, researched his financial situation, pursued him aggressively, and then helped him lie to me and our children for months while they conducted their affair." The room went silent. Laura's face went pale. "My story," Anna continued, "is about a woman who is now trying to rewrite history by claiming she was the victim of an abusive marriage, when in fact, she was the perpetrator who destroyed 2 families for financial gain." This isn't appropriate," Laura stammered. "This is a support group for victims of abuse." "You're right," Anna said. "It is. Which is why I'm here. Because I am a victim of abuse, your abuse." Anna pulled out a folder of her own and began reading from it. Bank statements showing Simon's expenditures on Laura. Hotel receipts from their romantic getaways. Text messages in which Laura discussed her plans to upgrade her lifestyle and leave her boring husband once Simon's divorce was finalized. "This woman," Anna said, pointing directly at Laura, "systematically manipulated my husband, lied to everyone around her, and is now trying to destroy an innocent man's reputation to cover up her own actions." The news cameras were capturing everything. Several women in the audience were murmuring to each other, clearly confused about what they were witnessing. That's when I stood up. "I'm Mike," I said simply. "Laura's ex-husband, the abusive stalker she's been telling you about." Laura's lawyer immediately stood up. "This is harassment. You have no right to be here." "Actually," I said, pulling out my own folder, "this is a public event, and I have every right to respond to false accusations made against me in a public forum." I walked toward the front of the room, feeling every eye in the place on me. "Laura's told you that I'm an abusive, controlling husband who's been stalking and harassing her. I'd like to show you what actually happened." I began methodically presenting the evidence that Deshawn and I had compiled. The timeline of Laura's affair. The financial records showing how I'd supported her career while she was cheating on me. The text messages showing that she'd initiated most of our post-separation contact. The social media posts where she'd lied about the circumstances of our divorce. "Laura asked me to be her friend after our divorce," I said. "She asked me to celebrate her new relationship with the man she'd been cheating with. She asked me to be mature and supportive while she destroyed my reputation and tried to turn our mutual friends against me." I looked directly at Laura, who was sitting frozen in her chair. "You want to talk about emotional abuse? Let's talk about lying to someone for 8 months while you cheat on them. Let's talk about asking them to pay your bills while you're spending their money on gifts for your lover. Let's talk about publicly humiliating them and then claiming they're the abuser when they finally fight back." The room was completely silent now. Even the news cameras seemed to have stopped rolling. "I never stalked Laura," I continued. "I never threatened her. I never tried to control her. What I did was refuse to be a victim. What I did was fight back against her lies with the truth. And what I did was refuse to let her destroy my life to cover up her own choices." I turned to address the room. "Some of you are probably here because you've experienced real abuse from real abusers. I'm sorry for what you've gone through, and I hope you get the support and justice you deserve. But don't let this woman use your experiences to legitimize her own lies." Laura finally found her voice. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," she said, her voice shaking. "This is intimidation. This is harassment." "No, Laura," I said calmly. "This is consequences. You spent months trying to destroy my reputation with lies. Now you get to experience what it feels like when the truth comes out." I walked back to my seat, leaving Laura and her lawyer to try to salvage what was left of their press conference. But the damage was done. The narrative had been shattered, the lies exposed, the truth revealed. Several women got up and left. The news crews began packing up their equipment. Anna approached me as I was gathering my things. "Thank you," she said simply. She needed to be stopped. "Thank you for speaking up," I replied. "That took courage." Emily appeared at my side, slipping her hand into mine. "Ready to go?" she asked. I looked back at Laura, who was sitting alone at the front of the room, her lawyer and the domestic violence counselor having apparently abandoned her. For a moment, I felt something that might have been pity, but then I remembered the 8 months of lies, the manipulation, the attempts to destroy my reputation and my relationships. I remembered the divorce party where she'd tried to humiliate me, and the social media campaign where she'd painted me as an abuser. Laura had wanted a war. She'd gotten one, and she'd lost. "Yeah," I said to Emily, "I'm ready to go." As we walked out of the country club together, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The battle was over. The truth had been told. And for the first time since this whole mess began, I was looking forward instead of backward. Laura could keep fighting if she wanted to, but she'd be fighting alone.